Fora TV. The world is thinking.
But when I think about that, I also think about what we see here. We have a bailout that reminds me of nothing so much as a hostage situation, where the kidnapper grabs somebody and says, "My feelings are hurt because you didn't pay me enough money. So if you don't pay me enough money, I'm going to cry. And then I'm going to hurt this person. And then I'm going to snatch somebody else." And see, the thing is, they're doing this in the living room of the police. And so the police, of course, just give up more money. Now you're going to say, that's crazy, right? Why don't we restructure society so that we prevent kidnappings? That makes some sense, you know? Because let's think about it, for example. In this money and banking course I'm talking about at Perry's got me teaching. Here it is, I'm studying institutions, banks, financial markets. I'm trying to tell students, I barely understand them myself, but I'm trying to tell students. And we've got institutions that are supposed to price and manage and mitigate risk, and what these institutions are doing is manufacturing and amplifying risk. Doing it in such a way that the risk is hidden from the regulators, hidden from the markets, hidden from the public, hidden from the people who are manufacturing the risk. Okay? My students say things like, well, Marcellus, you know, we read the textbooks and we read the stuff you tell us about, and well, our financial markets are supposed to allocate capital to its most efficient uses and circumstances that allow for the management of risk, right? I say, yeah. And they say, well, having all these foreclosures and bankruptcies and these empty houses, where your mother lives in Cleveland and people killing themselves because they lose their jobs and their houses, wouldn't that suggest that there's been a massive misallocation? I say, yeah. And they say, okay, so we now have the people who massively misallocated capital telling us what to do, right? I say, yeah. They say, Sellers, listen, we hear you're a hardcore guy from Philly, right? I say, right. They say, is this a Philadelphia way? Is that what we see here on a national scale? I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about that because I've been thinking about the role of finance, as my colleagues have spoken about. And I've been thinking a couple of things I want to share with you. If we back up and think about where this started from, everything that's been said is absolutely right, where this problem came from. But I think about the political economy of this. A political economy of low taxes and low regulation, and an economy where the majority of the people of this country, well, a minority at the time, but perhaps a majority now, couldn't afford the American dream. So we cut a social deal. Our social deal was to essentially finance consumption, any acquisition of assets by people who'd been abandoned by the economic, political, and social elites of this country in a world of economic and technical change, to finance that by debt. And we asked Wall Street, why don't you find a way to lend money to and to manage the risk of people who really can't afford to borrow money, okay? People, steel workers in Cleveland don't have jobs, poorly educated and suffering, folks who work in bodegas in the Bronx, folks who want the big house, who want the TV, but who can't really afford it, whose incomes will never allow them to afford it, folks who have to use their credit cards to pay their health insurance. Wall Street, you find a way to do it. And Wall Street did it. Wall Street did it. Because we ceded power to an instrument, a corporate form of financial management. And we asked markets to solve social problems. Somewhere along the line, we seem to forget that the corporation is a part of the social infrastructure, and its performance, particularly in the management of risk, is to be judged by whether or not our social needs are enhanced by the use of various forms of financial instruments, by various forms of financial institutions. We're now in a position where we've got automobile companies that are about to fail. We're afraid to use bankruptcy because of the long-term economic and financial consequences involved. We were afraid to use bankruptcy with regard to Bear Stearns, because we were afraid that if Bear Stearns went away, the plumbing of the financial system would collapse, and therefore we'd have economic crisis. You see what I mean by a hostage situation? This drove me back to Charles Lindblom and even Carl Polanyi to ask, does the corporation fit anymore? In our current system, the way we met the corporation is a device for accumulating capital, for driving growth, for managing our productive affairs, and we've somehow let the financing of this entity dominate, as has been said. And I keep wondering to myself, maybe after we somehow deal with the effective demand problem that we have, maybe the most radical and important thing we need to do is revisit the nature of the corporation. Revisit it at its basic level. Who and what is it for? Who are its stakeholders? How do we finance this in such a way that we manage risks effectively and we punish those whose risk-taking behavior threatens the entire system?